The Seattle Seahawks have made a couple of roster moves. We'll tell you all about it here on this edition of Seattle Seahawks Today. I am your fearless leader, Tyler Jones, here with you. Thanks for joining us. Before we go any further in today's show, folks, I want to make sure you are subscribed to the channel as we're closing in on 68,000 subscribers, just a little over 300 away from reaching that next milestone for our daily news and rumors, live shows 3 days a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, as well as our breaking news, Q-Day mailbags, and more. You need to be a part of everything happening with your favorite team. Best part about it, doesn't cost you a thing. Absolutely 100% free. YouTube.com/Seahawks TV to subscribe now. Join the family. You'll be glad you did, and we'll get started with today's show. Let's break down the latest Seattle Seahawks roster moves during OTAs, as we have one player that has signed and another player that has been let go. The newest member of the Seattle Seahawks is Mitch Van Vooren, a tight end, and he has got quite the fascinating story. If you don't know who he is, that's okay. I'll be honest, I didn't know who he was either till he signed, but we have quite the story to tell on his behalf coming up in just a bit. Meanwhile, Nate McCollum, a wide receiver out of North Carolina who just signed recently, he literally just showed up. He's already been waived. He's been moved and will be free to sign with any other team at this point. Let's start with McCollum here real quick, and then we'll go more in depth on Van Vooren. McCollum, not surprised to see him go. His production wasn't that great, if we're going to be that honest, at North Carolina. I was a little surprised when he got signed to begin with. They were testing him, seeing if they could find anything, and I guess they didn't really like what they were seeing, so they go a different direction there. Folks, I'll say this much. We see this Seattle team, and I look at roster moves going on all across the NFL. They make a lot of these small transactions of bringing in players and moving on from guys pretty fast this time of year, more so than the typical team around the NFL. And I'll say this much. This is the time for experimenting and seeing what you could potentially find. I mean, these type of guys typically are not ones that we're talking about potentially fighting for roster spots. Usually they're stash practice squad type players, but every once in a while you find a diamond in the rut. And in this case, it didn't work out with McCollum, and it didn't hurt you. He was here a week or two, and then you moved on from there. And now you bring in Van Vooren, and whether it was McCollum or Van Vooren, some of these other moves, you're kind of testing out your skill positions and seeing if you can find that player that maybe hasn't been used properly or it's been under-scouted and appreciated, and it's a chance just to see what you got here. So for Seattle, I appreciate them at least seeing what they could potentially find, because you just never know when something might pop up and could help out your offense more than you think. And I like the emphasis from John here to go after kind of these skill position guys and seeing if he can find something potentially. When I look at Van Vooren, and we'll tell you more about him in just a moment, he is very sneaky, and he is quite the athlete, folks. Will he make the roster? We'll talk more about that coming up later. But of all these under-the-radar UDFA signings and rookies that have been coming in within the last month or so of the experiment-type players, this is one of the most interesting experiments that I've seen on the part of Seattle. We'll explain more coming up in just a bit. How would you grade the Seahawks roster moves? Tell me in the comment section. Whip out your red pen, A, B, C, D, or F, way in the comment section, and let us know how you feel about Seattle's roster moves. Today's show is sponsored by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the place to go for daily fantasy made easy. Here's how it works. You choose two more players on any given category. Get the choice of more or less, whether you're talking fantasy points in football, rebounds in basketball, goals in hockey, all sorts of different categories to choose from. Do you know ball? There's only one series left of the playoffs, and the championship is officially on the line. That means time is running out for you to put your final takes to the test on PrizePicks, the best place to win cash on your favorite sports. This year's basketball playoffs are headed towards crowning a first-time champ in more than 50 years. Don't miss your last chance to cash in on history with PrizePicks. Pick more or less on player stats like points, rebounds, assists, and more for your shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash today. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. The basketball playoffs are wrapping up, but the action is still heating up on PrizePicks, the best place to cash in on your favorite sports. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Here is what I got going on PrizePicks, folks. Game 1 tonight between the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Indiana Pacers. I'm going with the more on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, 10.5 free throw attempts, going with less than 17.5 points on Tyrese Halliburton, and going with the more on Miles Turner to have more than 5 rebounds. If I put $20 down and all 3 of those hit, that turns into $100. There's also another deal that PrizePicks is offering for tonight's action. You can get a finals discount on Tyrese Halliburton at 13.5 points. So if you want to play the 17 number that you saw or the 13.5, they got great deals on PrizePicks, folks. Link is in the comments and description of today's video. PrizePicks, run your game. Check out PrizePicks today. You'll be glad you did. My grade, I'm going to go with a B on this. You didn't get worse, but you didn't necessarily get a whole lot better either. These are borderline roster guys that we're talking about. But when it comes to Van Vooren, I am very intrigued. He is quite the athlete. He is a former wide receiver turned tight end. And I know what some of you are thinking right away. I've seen how many people in the comment section over the last 2 years say, why can't we just switch Jake Bobo from wide receiver to tight end? Well, he's not big enough. That's why. Well, this guy was big enough to make that transition, and he is a former D1 track star. Although he finished off his career in the D3 level, he did perform at a high level at the Division I level in track and field, a 2-sport athlete. And Seattle Sports laid it out like this to tell you more about Van Vooren. Van Vooren played 2 seasons at St. Norbert College in his native Wisconsin. But it's not his football career that stands out the most. Prior to transferring to St. Norbert, he was an All-Big East in track at Marquette. In fact, Van Vooren set the Marquette school record in the 400-meter hurdles. I love having athletes. You guys know, for the most part, I went to the University of Kansas, big Kansas guy, and Mark Mangino, genius. He always talked about that he would, because they couldn't recruit the best players. He wanted athletes, and I'll find a spot for them to make it work. And it paid off pretty well for him with players like Aqib Talib and Chris Harris, Desmond Briscoe, you name it, of what went through that Kansas program. And I've always kind of thought that mentality can translate not just at the college level, but in the NFL and high school football and all that. And so with Van Vooren being an athlete, you can find a way potentially to show off that athleticism and the hurdling ability. All right? Now you got my attention. You talk about hurdling over defenders. I mean, white man can jump in this case. And that could potentially make him stand out a bit to have a shot with this roster, or at least be a stash guy for the practice squad if he can show off the leaping ability, those skills as far as that goes. He did participate in Brown's rookie minicamp, so he's already seen what other teams do potentially, kind of knows what to expect with this Seattle program here, and we'll see where things go from there. Do you think he's going to make the 53-man roster? It's your chance to predict it for me. Weigh in the comment section. Type Y for yes, in for no. Tell me what you think, if he will make it or not. More on Mitch Van Vooren, undrafted in 2025 out of St. Norbert College. He was a first-team All-NACC selection in 2024. And on top of that, too, we mentioned the track skills of being All-Big East at Marquette. He was a Division III All-American in track and field this past season as well. So first team in football in his conference and first team in track and field in All-American status at the Division III level. Size stacks up pretty decent. 6'5", 242 are his measurables. And his statistics weren't too shabby this past season. They're playing Division III football as he was able to haul in 10 touchdowns. Maybe there's a red zone target there. Averaged 15.4 yards a reception, which I don't care if you're playing D3 or D1, wherever it may be, that's impressive no matter where you're at. 510 yards, 33 total catches. It's intriguing what he brings to the table. I am fascinated by this. You know, when we go through OTAs, minicamp, and into training camp, we always find those guys, those UDFA standouts of sorts that we're rooting for, even if they don't have much chance to make it. Based on just this scouting report and getting to know Van Vooren a little bit more and seeing all these things here, I find myself rooting for the guy. I'm intrigued, and we'll see if he can show up and show out and potentially make the roster here for Seattle. It's definitely going to be fun to watch for sure. For continuing Seahawks coverage, subscribe now to Seattle Seahawks Today for free. Doesn't cost you a thing. YouTube.com/SeahawksTV. I'm Tyler Jones. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.